Just to point out, this is a Zoom meeting, so if you could put yourselves on mute. Um, I sincerely hope, after hearing about some Zoom bombings in the last few weeks, that we won't have anything like that, which is why I use the Eventbrite in order to register guests. I am Kathy Draycott. I am the EDI representative from Durham University's Department of Archaeology, and I'm joined by my EDI team member, Kristen Hopper, who is co-hosting this panel with me. And we are very, very grateful for a selection of people who have joined us today, who I think you'll have seen the list of, who have agreed to speak about their experiences of neurodiversity in archaeology. We hope that we might be able to repeat this in future years in order to start to get a number of people's experiences recorded, perhaps, and contribute to the resources that are available, some of which Amy has been putting together over the last years. And I'll let you actually talk about that a bit, Amy, if you want. Perhaps we can get you to go first as a respondent. Amy, do you want to say anything about the things that you did? I think it was last year, or was it in 2020 for?
Yeah, so it was actually in 2020. Myself, alongside Cara Jones and Alex Llewellyn, both from CIFA, sort of got our heads together. And sort of started looking at the fact that neurodiversity, especially in commercial archaeology, is quite prevalent, and there's a lot of people who do struggle, and a lot of people who sort of struggle in silence. I mean, Alex and Cara have done a fantastic job of expanding it into lunchtime chats, which has been fantastic, as well as creating sort of a lot of resources. So the three of us have kind of created this lovely platform that says, commercial archaeology and consulting archaeology is open to neurodiverse archaeology. And I'd like to just quickly give a quote from Neil Redfern, who emailed myself and Sarah this morning, who says that archaeology as a discipline and subject should be hugely proud and supportive of neurodiversity. Neurodiverse people make archaeology what it is, and that it expands boundaries of archaeology, storytelling, engagement, and participation. So Neil Redfern is the executive director for the Council of British Archaeology, and he's another sort of big supporter of the CIFA Neurodiversity in Archaeology platform, which sort of Cara, Alex, and myself have sort of been creating. Yes, it's pretty fantastic.
Sarah Jane Clements, who's one of our panelists, and I are on the newly formed CIFA Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity committee, and hope to be able to augment what people have been doing for CIFA, this really amazing work, and actually learn from it. So that's one of the reasons why I've asked people to join a panel, because the key word really is listening. So often we want to kind of fix things quite quickly and put things into action, and do that at the expense of really listening. I must say two things to start off with. For those who don't know, this is being recorded and will be available online. So if you don't want your picture showing or anything like that, that's perfectly fine. Turn off your video. The second thing is I have COVID, so please excuse my COVID brain if I get things wrong or I'm stumbling over words. I apologize for that, but I certainly didn't want to put this off because it is Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and this is a great way to mark this and hopefully get an opportunity to learn and take that listening and then form perhaps good actions further to what's already been done for the CIFA platform. So can I start off then by asking our panelists one by one? And if I start off with you, perhaps, Amy, the two questions that I had initially put to the panelists, which is, in short, how does your neurodiversity affect your everyday life and your work in archaeology? And what would be your vision of an archaeology in which neurodiversity would be at home? I'll add a third question to that, which is, feel free to critique that question. Are those the questions that you think need to be asked, or would you actually pose other questions? So Amy, if I could start with you.
Yeah. So I think say the third question is that those two questions are the correct questions to be asking, because neurodiversity is so individual. There's no box. All of us have different experiences, different symptoms. I'm very good at reading, but I am terrible in verbal format. Whereas I've got other friends who are fantastic in verbal format and are terrible at reading. Because neurodiversity isn't about knowledge, it's about how our brains tend to work. So yes, essentially it's so incredibly individual. I think these are the right questions to be asking, because it allows people to actually say how their neurodiversity does affect them, and kind of why. So for me, I was diagnosed quite late. I was only actually diagnosed in 2019 during my master's year at University of Bradford. But I'd kind of suspected quite a long time before that, because I always struggled to say why I understood something. So especially in commercial archaeology, where you're dealing with stratigraphy, you're dealing with sections, you're dealing with complex matrices. It'd be one of those where someone sort of came up to me and said, "Oh, yeah, can you describe this feature?" I'd be going, "No, it's not that I don't understand it. I just literally need to draw you a highlighted picture with arrows, rather than specifically describing what's happening." So it's always one of those things where I always felt quite stupid in commercial archaeology, just because of my inability to say how I understood something. Because like I say, I'm very good at sort of visual and reading, but I'm terrible at verbal and audio. So I actually started getting diagnosed because I realized I couldn't play Scrabble. I genuinely could not think of how to spell words that were more than 3 letters long. And while that seems like such a sort of daft kind of, way of starting to think, oh, maybe I'm dyslexic, like that's been quite true for other friends of mine, where, sort of just being that little click of going, I know words, I can speak words, and I can read words, but no idea of how that sequencing of words or letters is put together. It's very much the same with maths as well. So again, it's basic maths I cannot do. And again, it's, you are treated quite like you're stupid for not being able to do basic maths, because my brain specifically doesn't understand the sequencing. So sort of how it's affected me has always been sort of very severe mental health, through school, through my undergraduate, because I had a gap between my undergraduate and my master's for a career in commercial archaeology. And you do feel, when you're treated like you're stupid because you don't understand basic concepts, that really has a knock-on effect. Excuse me. So it's sort of very much, that's how it's affected me. It's my vision. It's very much, I'd love to see more of a sort of standardization of context sheets for all units, because again, sort of commercial archaeology, especially in the UK, you do hop around companies. It is very much a contractual based employment. And when you're hopping around different companies, all of them have different context sheets, some of them different recording styles. While there is a basic, here's how to do archaeology, it's for sort of people like myself with sort of neurodiversity, when I suddenly I'll learn one context sheet and how to write one context sheet, then go somewhere else and end up back at square one, unable to do my job properly to the standard which I'm able to do my job, because of something as simple as, am I ticking this box or am I writing it out in full? So I love to see sort of things like that. And again, I've got couple of years of consultancy experience in my belt as well. And the biggest thing which I struggled with was the criticisms. So when you get a document back, it's all track changes, it's all marked, there's lots of lines everywhere, it's very visually confusing. And also, when you're sort of being faced with documents that's just all objective criticism, you know, reword this line, reword this sentence, your brain doesn't often compute that you're doing things well. So again, you do need that sort of visual, this is a good paragraph. However, which I've noticed that a lot of companies just, they're sort of very good at that clinical criticism, but not very good at that subjective praise, which for people with neurodiversity is really important. So then we know that we're on the right lines. We know that actually our understanding is good, and it's just how we're writing it or wording it or sequencing it. So that's sort of a couple of things which I'd love to sort of see going forward is, sort of more sympathy for track changes documents, for objective criticism, and certainly sort of standardization across all units for context sheets and recording manual writing and setting out.
I think that's really great. Thank you so much, Amy, because I really relate to the visually confusing thing that you were talking about. You know, when something is visually confusing, it takes a long time to process, and there could be a lot of good work done, I think, on trying to smooth out that area of and the context sheets. Sounds like a brilliant plan. And you know, the point about the pointing out the good things as well is very much a part of pedagogic theory. You know, whether it gets into feedback as much as we'd like in the universities, it's I'm not clear really, but I think that that's a really good principle to embed in any kind of feedback, basically, including book reviews, I should say. But anyway, I won't go on about that. Can I move on to Sarah Jane? Would you like to come in then and respond to the same questions, and then maybe pick up on anything that Amy said, so we can pick up as we go along the conversation?
Yeah, so I'm currently researching disability inclusion in archaeology, doing a professional doctorate at the University of Hertfordshire, as well as my other roles with the CIFA and the Enabled Archaeology Foundation. My job role is slightly, I used to be a commercial archaeologist, but then due to my conditions, I moved into heritage management and HER. Like Amy, I do feel that the way people kind of phrase things isn't quite very helpful, and finding kind of simple things quite difficult. So, for example, people might say, "Oh, I've said, you know, throughout my life, how can you be, you know, doing a doctorate, but you can't understand these simple things?" And those comparisons are very difficult. And, you know, thinking, although it's only something I've recently sort of started to identify as, thinking back, it was the same, you know, growing up, when people would say, you know, you've got grade 8 in this instrument, but why can't you remember how to do scales? So looking back, there was a lot of things there. So I've had to make a lot of notes because I struggle with train of thought. So just if I forget, that's why. So I think for me, it's hard to isolate from other conditions as well, because they kind of overlap a lot, and I've got other conditions. So there are those things to bear in mind as well. I can find it quite difficult to pick up on people's behaviour and intentions sometimes, and that can lead to some misunderstandings, particularly sort of in emails as well, because it's more difficult to understand things behind what people are saying, I suppose. Can lead to sort of taking on a lot of extra work and affecting confidence, and concentration can be difficult sometimes. I think it does help to have responsibility and control for things as well. And I think there's a bit of a perception with, you know, if you need to move around a lot, people perceiving that maybe as being lazy and not committed to what you're doing. But, you know, quite often you do need to move around. It does help to concentrate. I also struggle with things like tables and Another example would be things like job bulletins, because I'll be looking for certain things such as like working from home opportunities or what area they're in, where if they're all mixed up with all different things, it's very hard to kind of pull those things out. The forms as well, depends how they're structured, that can be quite challenging. Things can become sort of obsessive sometimes, but that can also be a really good thing in terms of kind of research and things and stuff. And social interactions can be a bit difficult sometimes, because that can be quite anxious about if it's people you haven't met before and things. Noise and sudden changes in kind of work can be a bit difficult as well. So giving people notice about things that are going to change is quite helpful. And I do think that reframing things in terms of positive things that people can do, rather than thinking of the things that are, you know, the negative things, reframing that is really needed. So I think, like Amy said, it's very variable. People have different symptoms and different needs. So I think the positive things are that people can have more empathy, very determined, dedication, and seeing things from a different point of view that other people might not necessarily have. For example, people can be not so good at writing and things, but can have increased sort of spatial reasoning and problem solving. So my vision for archaeology would be, I think there's a particular problem with recruitment and lack of career progression for people. I'd say that most people come to me with support for neurodiversity in my role, like through the year and my work. The most messages I get are about neurodiversity. It's very individual, and the feedback I've had from other people is that we need more training with input from experts. You know, things are helpful, sort of not swapping between desks and not moving people between different tasks all the time. Again, it's really individual, so I think discussing that with the person is the most important. Like, what do you need? We need to consider, like Amy said, moving forward with digital recording systems. I know people are concerned about that, and we need to bear in mind that not everybody might be able to do that, and in designing them need to consult people. The main thing that I think, as well as the career progression, which would help, is the jobs think about how they can be employers, and jobs think about how they can make things more flexible with working patterns, part-time job shares, because things like sleep can be an issue, as well as lots of other things. There's also, we know there's difficulty with people getting diagnosis. There's long waiting lists, so that can be a real issue. And my main message would be just to embrace difference. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And I should make it clear to people who have just come in, Sarah Jane Clements and I both are now on the EDI committee of CIFA, so that's how I got to know her. And she's also on the admin of the Enabled Archaeology Foundation, which was only recently made into a proper foundation with trustees. Sarah Jane, do you want to say anything about that, and anything about resources that are available through it?
Yeah, feel free to get in contact. We do have a lot of resources on the website. We've got training and excavation coming up this summer with places for free places for enabled disabled archaeologists. So yeah, follow us on Twitter, and yeah, do get in touch.
Thanks ever so much. That was fantastic. I thought actually your part-time job shares and those sorts of solutions could potentially be quite useful for commercial archaeologists. But of course, I don't run a commercial archaeology outfit. But maybe we can come back to this in the discussion afterwards. I'm going to move on to Eltia, who's one of our MSc students at Durham University. Eltia, do you want to unmute and
Hello.
and come in?
Hi. In regards to what Amy was saying, I do agree with that, because Amy mentioned that sometimes people will be rather incredulous if you say, well, I really do struggle with basic maths. Now, the university does facilitate with some maths sort of and stats labs, which are useful. But when it came to completing my dissertation, there was quite a large statistics component of that dissertation. And I really, really needed help. And I actually didn't receive any help from my professors with that statistical component. And it was very, very difficult. I had to enlist the help of my dad's friend, who is a mathematician, because I couldn't do it. And it's always been a problem for me ever since I was a little kid. I remember just not being able to sort of do things that were quite basic, so times tables and multiplication, division, things like that. So I think that is definitely worth considering, that if a student voices I have difficulties with these components, to actually offer some constructive help rather than just letting people to their own devices. Because I do believe, had I got a bit more help with the statistics component, my dissertation probably would have been just that little bit better. In regards to my, so I'll just look at those questions again. Work in archaeology. So there is a recent increase in bioarchaeology as to studying disability and the care of disabled individuals in the past. And I do find that quite interesting. But as a disabled person, there's always this assumption that care is delivered in a compassionate way. And I would like to just sort of make it known that the archaeological record doesn't necessarily reflect that. So I am proposing to do my master's dissertation on the archaeology of post-medieval psychiatric institutions. And those are contexts wherein obviously individuals are being cared for, but just because an individual is being sustained and kept alive doesn't necessarily mean that that care is compassionate. And I think also, if we marginalize the heritage and the archaeology of that pertains primarily or exclusively to disabled individuals, such as hospitals and wards that pertain to those contexts, the archaeology of people with intellectual disabilities, mental health, illnesses and disabilities, if we continue that heritage being marginalized, because there's the kind of stereotype of the spooky asylum, the scary dark heritage, what that does is not only it's not conducive to the preservation and the research of the archaeology in the here and now, but it also marginalizes disabled people right now, contemporary disabled people and people who utilize inpatient services. So I'm hoping to sort of challenge this idea of dark heritage, because psychiatric hospitals, hospitals for intellectually disabled people are not dark places. People live their life in these places, and to assume that it's all just dark and to assume that it's just a story of victimhood doesn't allow for the full picture at all. So I think that's pretty much all I have to offer. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Altia. It's I think that's a really important perspective that you have on the archaeological past, and one that I think Becky Gowland is listening in, and she will recognise this from work that she's done herself. I wanted to ask you a quick question about the math support, but I'll come back to that afterwards so that we make sure that we get some time for others to speak. Can I just ask if Cara Batten is here, because I know that she may be in the field, so may not have been able to join us, but if she is, just speak up, because sometimes you can't quite understand who's here from the names that pop up. No, she's not here. I think Amelia Holden might be here. Amelia, are you here? On your phone? Okay, I'll leave that. She might not be able to come in anyway, even if she is. Lizzie Scales, I know, has just been able to join us. And Lizzie, if you are able to unmute yourself, I know that you're traveling at the moment. And
yeah, I've actually just got back in, so I'm.
Oh no,
it's quite lucky.
If you do you want to what we were doing is everybody was going to go around and answer the two questions that I'd posed about how your neurodiversity affects you in your daily life and in archaeology, and your vision for an archaeology in which neurodiversity is at home, and whether you had any critique or response to those questions, as in the, do you think that there are other questions that are more important? So we're going one by one and doing that. And I should just introduce quickly, Lizzie is you're another MSc student, I think.
Yeah, I am. I do bioarchaeology.
Yeah.
So I was on the same course as Adhd when in the beginning term, but we've now separated. So for me, I'm both dyslexic and have ADHD. So I've in the process of getting formally diagnosed for my ADHD, but my dyslexic, I've been dyslexic since I was a little kid. So I got my formal diagnosis for that when I was 10, which meant I got a lot of support within my first school, but very different to a lot of my other friends. So I was a kid, I'm very intelligent. I've got a reason why I got noticed is because I've got the highest IQ in the class, but the lowest reading age. And subsequently, because of that, I've gone through like my schooling, I've gone through university, and every single step of the way I've gone, oh, you don't need any extra time, you don't need any extra help, because you've got good grades anyway. You're like, you don't need all of this because you're doing well and you're being successful. But I think for me, reading is a massive thing I've always struggled with. So it takes me at least 4 times to read a question before I've even got a grip to what it means. And I've found that a massive issue in classwork, in reading and understanding instructions, and making sure I've got the right end of the stick of a lot of things. So when I did my dissertation, I spent so long reading all the papers, because it doesn't take me just a quick skim read through to understand what's going on. I have to have a text to speech playing, and I have to then be marking with lots of different colours, lots of different highlights to truly understand what's going on in the paper. So it can take me an immense amount of time to do an essay. And then I've got the battling ADHD in my brain, which I didn't realise at the time, which was I can't do something unless either there's a time pressure for it, or I'm hyperfixated on the topic. So if I'm really enthusiastic about something, I will happily get there and I'll do all of the research all at once, and I'll be really happy and I'll love it and I'll have a great time. But if I'm not about that, it's something that's not incredibly interesting to me, I can be staring at my computer screen for hours going, you can just do it, just do the research, just do it, you're fine. And I just physically can't do it. And it's a really hard thing to explain to someone who doesn't have ADHD or isn't neurodiverse or neurotypical, because you can't explain to them as to why you can't do it. There's no sort of black and white answer of, oh, I can't do it because of this. It's physically like a wall is in your brain that you can't penetrate, and you're telling yourself you must do it because you've got to do it, it's time pressure, but you can't until it's almost like impossible for you to get that task done. And then suddenly I'll be there ramming through and getting everything done all at once. So for me, deadlines are a nightmare, because I'm always like, I've got to do it. It's 2 weeks for this essay. If I start now, I can do it and plenty of time. And I can't do it because then I've also got the added pressure of the dyslexia. It's taking me about 5 times longer to actually do it. So I'm then like, oh, I'll just read a couple of papers, and then it'll be like 1 paper has taken up the whole day of my time frame. And having that combat, I've found, especially during my undergrad, has been incredibly stressful and very hard to do. I found as well with having my ADHD, I'm one of those people, I get involved in everything. And no matter how much I would say, like, right, I've got to spend some time on this now, I've got to spend my time on my work. If I'm not mentally stimulated at every single moment of my day, then I can't get anything done in my day. So I have to be constantly doing things. And I found that's definitely made an impact on my work, because then it comes to the end of term, I've got 10,000 things I've signed myself up for. I've got all of these assignments as well. And I literally will come home from university and I will crash for like 2 days where I just sleep and I just recover. I remember to eat at that point. I'm really bad at doing eating because I just can't do it. But it's one of those sort of ones where I just got to keep going. Otherwise, I'll just end up crashing in a different way. In terms of the questions, like you said about understanding of how it affects my uni daily life, I know for me, so slides can sometimes be going too fast. And I find it really important that I then have, so things are recorded that I can go over separately in my own time. I've also found that in some of my lectures this year, we've done it in half-an-hour slots rather than 45-minute slots. I think it was actually Becky who's done it in some of her lectures. And I found that incredibly useful, because my attention span, it will be there to a certain point and then I'll drop, and then I'm in the lecture and I'm really finding it interesting, but my brain's going because I've just run out of steam. So having a 30-minute rather than a 45-minute, for me, I found incredibly useful. Having slides up as well as a slide I can go through on a regular basis is good to go back to. That means I don't have to write down notes sometimes, because sometimes I take it a little bit faster, and like sometimes I can screenshot a slide and I can be like, right, that's my note, perfect. When people don't put their slides up beforehand, I do end up struggling a lot more, because at the same time, that's where the ADHD and the dyslexia are battling here, is that my ADHD, I need things to happen quickly, quick, and then a break. Whereas my dyslexia's brain's busy going, I don't have enough time to take in the information on the slide because I'm having to read it for 4 more times than the rest of my cohort. So it's one of these things, it's like, that's why having this beforehand can be really helpful, because I've got an understanding of the topic before I go into the room, so that I then can have the mental stimulation for that certain amount of time, but then also then have my break where then I go, and break, time to rest. It's a very incredibly hard 9 a.m.s in the morning. Like this year, I seem to be very unlucky. If almost all of my things are 9 a.m. and I'm just not alive at 9 a.m. Like, as much as I will try to be, and I will try to get up and I'll get going and I'm out of bed, my brain doesn't work in a way where I can be up at 9 a.m. I've always struggled with it, always will struggle with it. And especially if we're having those half-an-hour breaks, it just makes a difference of, like, you are at that point where you're mentally drained. So I'm not concentrating, like, especially if you're in a lecture hall, I'm not allowed to just get up and move around and distract myself for a bit and go over here and go over there. Like, especially my ADHD, like right now, I'm fiddling with a hair bubble because I can't just sit still. And I think that's something as well, it's not really, you're not allowed to do. And having it online has been great, because I can, to have my cameras off, I can get up, I can do something else. If I'm not quite mentally stimulated enough by what someone's talking, I'm still there, I'm still listening, and I'm still intaking, but I need to do something else so that I can actually intake the information. It's a really hard thing to explain to people who are very neurotypical, because they're like, what do you mean? But like, if you think about, like, your brain is running 10 miles an hour all the time. If something isn't making you run that keep going, you have to find something else that will help keep your brain going. And okay, I do crash, and I do normally crash after a lecture, but that's the only way I can actually find that I'm listening. Because if I am not being stimulated enough, I crash and then I don't get anything from the lecture. So for me, having interactions within lectures of like asking us questions, giving us a task to do, or having a little bit of a funny meme halfway through the lecture, that break and that stimulation can really help make it interesting through the whole thing. But it's, for me, I've always found it's definitely a battle between ADHD and dyslexia. And that's something I've always, was when I got diagnosed, something like, oh my God, this all makes sense now. And I think it's something that really needs to be remembered, is that when you are neurodivergent, you are normally a mixture of things. And it's not just black and white of you are going to be this and you fit into this box all the time. And sometimes one thing wins here and the other thing wins over here. So for example, for me in my essays, the ADHD wins in the sense of like, I can't do the essay until the deadline. But then the dyslexia is then at fault, because then I'm trying to get all this information in and do all of my reading that I then can't get all of the information in for. And I know for me, getting other people to read my work has been incredibly useful, because sometimes it can make 100% sense in my brain, but because I've gone 10 miles an hour faster than everyone else, they don't quite understand my language. They're like, what do you mean here? So for me, I've always had to have my mum check every single one of my essays, because if I don't, I'm going to get back of people going, what did you mean here? Like, this is just words on a page. And that's like really important to remember, because I'm not an English person. I can't write essays. And I've gone into a subject that a lot of it is in practice and it is in person. We are digging, we are in labs, but a lot of it, at the end of the day, we write paper. And we need to normalize how grading at the moment is very much based on how well can you write a paper, whereas a lot of people in archaeology can't write a paper. And I feel like it's very much swayed to the English students who can write a good paper, and that's not all and end all of a good archaeologist. I'm amazing when I get into a lab, when I've been given my lab stuff prior to the event, so I can go through, take out the wishy-washy language and just have you need to put X into Y, and then you can have the wishy-washy after that. But I need a step-by-step basis. I know I definitely struggled with that within my labs this year, was a lot of language used, in my sense, as I use wishy-washy. There's no need for it to be there. You've got this sort of flask here. Within this flask, you need to add X and Y in this order. Because if it's not written in the order, then I will put the wrong thing in at the wrong time, because they've used too much language that I'm just confused about. And I know it's definitely meant as a lack of trust within me doing my own practical work, because I sometimes need reassurance on other people, because it's not written in a dyslexic friendly format. Like, I remember talking to someone in one of my lectures about it, and they tried their best to write it in a dyslexic friendly format for me, and it came back with so much wishy-washy language in there still that I didn't even know what was going on. Like, if people skim read, they can pick up X, Y, Z, and they can be like, oh great, fine. When I've compared what I've skim read to someone else, I've picked up something completely different from a text that a neurotypical person would. I think that's something that's not really picked up on enough within archaeology. There's a lot of us here, and there's a lot of us who struggle, but I think we're still being ruled out by a lot of neurotypical behaviour, and that's something that needs to be remembered and appreciated within the department. Sorry, that was quite fast.
No, that was very useful, actually. I related to a lot of what you said there, Lizzie, but I'm not going to go on about myself. I was particularly interested in what you were saying about the language that's used in descriptions and instructions and feedback and things. And I think it's unintentional, I'm sure.
It is.
But that's the thing to work on then, to get some feedback on the feedback and the instructions and what it is, trying to pinpoint what it is that you describe as wishy-washy, for instance, or might be fluffy or fuzzy or
Yeah, for me, it's like simply like, oh, here is a beautiful flask that we are going to use because it has all of these properties. And we have this chemical here, which is an acid. And then we're going to put that into our alkaline. And then that something happens because of that. And then it's like, I don't need any of that. Like, I don't need the description. We can almost have it as two separate things. We have this flask. So we have a conical flask. We need to add X and Y into the flask in this order. This is because this flask is this and that. And then we can, it's like, it's almost separating the reasoning behind the action. I need, it's kind of like a shopping list sort of thing. What do I need to get? I need to get X, Y, Z. And this is how you get X, Y, Z, by going around to this X, Y, Z. Oh, then you need X can be found in this sort of line. And it's those sort of things.
Cookbooks.
Yeah.
Style. Yeah.
Well, even cookbooks can be wishy-washy. I'm always highlighting my cookbooks and stuff like that because I don't understand, use wishy-washy language again. And it's really hard to explain to someone who is neurotypical what language is wishy-washy because they can pick it out. But really, I just need something very basic. You've got to real strip away the language and you've just got to have, this is what we want, this is what we want to get, how we get there. Okay, we need to add X to Y. And then once we have this new chemical, we then place that here, and this is what happens to this here, and then we put this in here and that and there without any of the why we're doing it, because I don't need to know why at the moment. I can learn that before or after, and then it would just help so many people. I think even neurotypical people will find that helpful. It takes time.
I agree. I'm gonna move on.
Yes.
Lizzie, it's not obviously because you haven't got so much to contribute. It's just to bring in Reba, who's been patiently waiting, and who is one of my PhD students, in fact, working in classical archaeology. So we'll have a different kind of disciplinary perspective on things in some ways. Reba, are you still there?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I'll mute myself now and allow you to address the questions, if that's okay.
Sure. So yeah, hi, I'm Reba. I'm working with Kathy and Robin at Durham University on my PhD, which is looking at how Black Africans have been represented in Greco-Roman antiquity, which isn't super relevant, but that's just what a bit of background to me. I wasn't really picked up on as having anything different until I did my master's at the Uni of Oxford, when it was the pace change at that university was, I was warned about it. People said, oh, you got to hit the ground running, you've really got to do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, well, you have to do that at any university if you're doing a master's. Like, you're just telling me I have to work hard, and I was going to work hard anyway, so thanks. But because it was condensed into 1 year and I really did have to hit the ground running, I thought I was running, and then it turned out I really wasn't, and something was going quite wrong. And my tutor at the time, my course tutor, was giving me my work back, and she was getting increasingly frustrated with me for doing things like spelling people's names consistently like backwards or wrong, or just really strange mistakes that I was making that I wasn't able to correct myself, and I would have no idea I'd done it. And she was like, she did say, she was writing on my work, this is lazy, why can't you do this, why have you not done this? And I was sitting there thinking, I got firsts all throughout my undergrad, I worked really hard to get into this university, and I'm now being told I'm an idiot. Like, what's happened here? So she suggested that I went to get sort of checked out for dyslexia, was her suggestion. So I went and I did that. I had several sessions of testing, I suppose, like where they give you lines of shapes that are different colors and tell you to find the odd one out. And I was just bewildered by the whole process. And it ended up, my report back was that I have a specific learning difficulty. Not necessarily dyslexia, not necessarily dyspraxia, not quite, ADHD, not quite autism, but something that is as yet unnamed, but that is definitely affecting my learning and my processing of information and my ability to sort of cope in a high pressure academic environment. And it sort of was revealed to me through sort of sessions after that, so I was sort of encouraged to explain how I'd been working before. And I was told that was my method of working was highly unusual. And I was like, no, but surely everyone has to record their lectures and goes back and listens to it 3 times to be able to understand it, and then make notes that they weren't able to make. Like, that's what everyone does, right? And they were like, no, that's kind of what neurotypical people can do. What you're doing is much more on the neurodiverse side of things. And I was like, interesting, very interesting, because that kind of explained why I had no fun at university, where all my sort of friends were able to have more time to do things, you know, to experience London, because I did my undergrad in London, and they were always going out and doing things. Like, I was under constant pressure that I was giving myself to work so much harder to achieve what I wanted to achieve, whereas I think that it's sort of a difference in the amount of effort that has to be put in. So I didn't have fun. I didn't do anything. I just studied solidly for 3 years, and then studied solidly and had kind of a meltdown for 1 year doing my master's. And I remember at the end of my master's, I said, I don't want to do a PhD. I can't do this anymore. Like, this is awful. So I had a 2-year break. And then I thought, no, I just need to come to terms with myself as a researcher who is neurodiverse in some way, and sort of adjust my expectations of what I'm able to do in certain timeframes and how I go about it, essentially. And then I was like, okay, I'm in a better place now. I can try and do this, because this is what I want to do. But yeah, mostly that it manifested, the result of this was pretty bad mental health for several years, particularly during my master's and then the years after it. It was a huge sense of imposter syndrome, and feeling as though I didn't deserve to be on these courses and deserve to get, you know, good marks, because I was having to work so much harder. And if I was clever, this would be easy for me. But the fact that I'm having to do, you know, so much indicates that I'm not clever. And that was kind of what had been, certainly in my master's, the first half of it, that was what was suggested. But that changed as we, you know, got through, and it turned out there was something else going on. But to get more specific about it, really, as to how it actually manifests, is I have real difficulty in sort of oral situations. So if I'm sitting having a conversation with someone and someone else is talking behind me about something, I then can't focus on anything that's going on, and I sort of start to drift, and I'll be like, because there's too much for my brain to try and process at once. It can't differentiate between the conversation I'm having and the conversation someone else is having behind me, which has been a real problem in a recent job I got actually at Beamish. I'm working there as a research associate, but it's an open plan office, which I guess maybe that works for people who are more neurotypical than I am. But for me, it's been an ever escalating source of stress, because I can't work around other people I think there's like 8 of them plus me, and they'll all be having conversations about what they did at the weekend, and about, you know, their dogs and their kids, and someone will stick their head around the door and have want to chat about recipes or whatever, and I'll be sitting there thinking, I can't do this. So I have to then remove myself from the situation. And then I sort of feel quite antisocial. I'm like, I don't want these people to think I don't like them, because I do. But it becomes a whole sort of spiral of, I give off a very antisocial air in the workplace, because I simply can't process being around that many people, all talking, all making noises, all having phones ringing and stuff at once. It doesn't work for me. And it didn't work when I worked in retail either, when we had lunch breaks. It wasn't a lunch break for me unless I was by myself in this one little cupboard where there was no conversation and no extra sort of stimulation there. And so it seems sort of, you know, sort of a bit of an academic trope to be like, oh, you know, I need quiet to work, but like I really genuinely do, otherwise I become unable to function. And I feel like there's a lot of sort of overlap between what Lizzie was saying and also what Sarah Jane was saying, and I've seen some other people just pop up in the chat there having these similar experiences, which I think ultimately what we all sort of regardless of which type of, neurodiversity we have, the overlap seems to be we're all doing so much more work than neurotypical people in sort of a variety of different ways, and we're all finding it kind of exhausting. And that's certainly the exhaustion is becoming, it has been apparent in my PhD since the start. It sort of comes in waves. I have like a few good months, and then I have like a month where I can't really I just have to go back to reading or building my database because I can't have those engaged thoughts that I really need to, because of the amount of effort I've been putting into doing the good work. It's a real sort of process. Yeah, Lizzie, I definitely agree there. What else? Oh, another thing that's, sorry, this is also disjointed because I struggle deeply with memory recall as well. That's something that really came up in my assessment, which means when I'm talking about myself, if I don't have it listed sort of specifically, I find it really hard to make the thoughts come out, because they're there. It's just I can't quite access them. And that comes across in my talks as well. I think I have to really plan if I'm giving a talk or a presentation. I have to, get my script. I have to practice it a lot. Not necessarily because not because I don't know the material, but just because if I don't, it will not come out correctly, and I'll start to jump around all over the place, and I'll forget what I'm talking about, and I won't be able to remember other parts of it, which is kind of what's happening now because my notes weren't detailed enough. I've got them on my other screen, but there's not enough there for me to be able to flow properly. So I apologize. Which is, again, that leads into the imposter syndrome, because it makes me feel like, like, oh, I'm not doing this right, even though it's sort of more than that. So I don't know, for me, it's been not disheartening, but it's a cause of stress, like regularly, which is something that I think we could use, all of us perhaps, some help with and support with. I don't know whether it would be in a pastoral sense or just in the sense of having the things that we need to succeed readily available to us when we start. So for me, recordings or recording devices. When I was at uni, I had to, buy my own. Little things like that could make a real huge difference for people who struggle in the same way that I do, or in, adjacent ways. And I guess sort of the final thing, that all of that compounds to make it quite hard for me to sort of think outside of instructions when given them. So, and that's something that has come up in the workplace as well at Beamish, because if someone tells me to do a thing, I will do the thing. And then they'll be like, oh, well, have you done this and that and that and that? And I'm like, well, no. Because there was no indication that was what was needed to be done. And then I will go and do it, of course, because they've said, oh, well, you need to do that. I'm like, cool, that's fine, I will. But sort of, I guess it goes back to language that people use and expectations that people have, or sort of implied instruction. I don't do well with implied instruction. I do well with actual instruction. And I think that could be something that we could think about going forwards as well. A real sort of closer look at how we instruct people to work, and to be really explicit about our expectations of particular jobs and particular tasks. So thank you for that. Again, sorry if it was a bit all over the place.
No, it wasn't. I thought it was really useful. And again, I mean, I can't tell you how many things that I relate to with this. I'm just going to quickly bring in Amelia, because Amelia wanted to participate, and Alex Llewellyn says she's unfortunately going to have to go off. But thanks, Alex, for coming. Amelia wanted to participate, but then she's in the field at Bishop Auckland, but she's been on her phone, and if she is still there and can unmute, that would be great if she can come in. If Cara Batten is there as well, who's also, I think, at Bishop Auckland, she's welcome to come in. I'm sorry that we're running over slightly the time. Amelia, are you there? She might have gone off.
No, I think she's here, but she's still not able to unmute.
Unmute her phone. Yes.
So yeah.
Okay, that's okay, Amelia. Oh, it's just one of those things with Zoom, isn't it? What I was going to ask people who, there's been a really lively contribution to the chat, and I was going to ask people if they would be happy with me distributing the chat in a kind of tidied up way, because I think that there's probably, you know, quite a lot in there that would be useful for people, including the links. Becky, you have your hand up. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I would love to if you could share the chat, but also just to say that I've found this incredibly useful as a teacher. I think there's been really useful information that's come out from this, and I would love it if we could have another session or get together again, because I think there's just, you know, it really, you know, and seeing some of the comments that like, for example, Jessica's put in the chat, it's really difficult, you know, what she's going through. And I think, you know, if we can think about ways to improve things going forward for everyone, I think that would be really helpful. So I just to say I would really value another session like this, and thank you.
Completely agree. And of course, I'll just say that this was, of course, put on as part of the department's recognition of Neurodiversity Celebration Week, but going back to Amy's work and SIFA, you know, people have been putting in a lot there already, and I think really I owe it to them now to just go to them and say, hey, you know, do we want to put on some more things under their auspices, and you know, help to support some more of these kinds of conversations, and also kind of, you know, ideas for action and how we can get people into situations where they can advise, because it is those kinds of very subtle things about, you know, writing things as though it's a kind of, you know, a really straightforward cookbook rather than a kind of flowery cookbook, and things which are going to make all the difference, I think. And I really like the idea of those standardized context sheets and the visual coherence of things. And but I think this is just, it's not a start, because I think the SIFA work that was done in 2020 is really you know, really important, but it's a start for us as a department, certainly, to really kind of get on board properly with that. I'm going to stop talking now and open up to other people who are attending for questions and comments, if you'd like to come in.
Kathy, I just wanted to say really quickly, I mean, I'm echoing Becky how useful this is as teachers and things, but I think one of the things is people who don't have experience or haven't had these conversations, there's just so much they don't think about in terms of how we could be doing this better. And you know, it's really hard to make, but I really do think we should be trying to work a bit harder at awareness of a lot of these experiences, because, you know, thinking about, you know, people who might be tutors on a course, and they get told, well, you've got someone in your class who has this, but they have no concept of what does that actually mean in terms of that person's experience, or how we could be doing this better. And so I think that these conversations going forward, and maybe finding ways to integrate them into to wider conversations, would just be so useful. So thank you, everyone who shared everything today. It's been amazing.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks for co-hosting in case I hadn't overcome it with my COVID. Becca, can you come in?
Hello, this might be, can you hear me? I don't know if yeah, perfect. Sorry, I am currently in a shared office, so I can't really put my video, sorry. Yeah, so I'm finding that all of this really useful, because thinking especially with what Becky was saying about teaching, because I didn't know I had ADHD when I was doing my undergraduate, and there are a lot of things, you have a lot of those opportunities during undergrad to feed back to your lecturers through surveys and everything, to understand how they can kind of adapt and change these things. And I just really wish that I'd had an understanding of my brain even before getting diagnosed with ADHD, but more in my undergrad. So I could have fed this back to the lecturers, because I said somewhere earlier in the chat that people always assume that archaeology is quite a visual, kinesthetic learning environment, but actually there are certain ways that teaching is done, particularly for the sciencey aspects of archaeology, that are particularly difficult. And I basically, what I'm doing now my PhD on, I thought I was too stupid to do it. I loved the Mesolithic from the beginning of my undergraduate, but I thought it's got a lot of environmental science stuff, and I cannot compute, and all of the kind of literature and publications out there are inaccessible. They're all really technical. They don't really explain things in a visual way, especially when you just see loads of lithics. But it wasn't until my, I think my master's, that I started to get to grip with the fact that actually I learned differently, and that was because of one lecturer who is now my supervisor. And I'm appreciating that they listen to me now. They were listening to me before I even was diagnosed with ADHD. They always were very supportive. They're quite, for me, a rarity in our department. But it was brilliant. Sorry, I've basically lost my train of thought a little bit, but I just went on a little rant about everything. But essentially, like, I guess I'm really trying to say is, I just kind of feel like when lecturers are thinking about teaching, they would do things in a way that kind of teach to the neurodivergent brain. And I also sometimes have difficulty with using the words neurotypical, because I feel like that kind of idea of neurotypical is already encompassed with neurodivergence. It's a spectrum. Brains are different. So whilst I understand that neurotypical means, you know, the kind of productive brain, or whatever, I do struggle with that kind of difference between the neurodivergent and neurotypicals, because yeah, I don't know, again, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I kind of wish that there were opportunities earlier on to kind of understand that I learned differently, even if I wasn't diagnosed with anything. But I just feel like, yeah, hopefully feeding it back to my supervisors have said that the feedback has changed the way that they teach a little bit, actually realizing that actually people do have different processing. Mine is particularly with visualization, so I would be given information. So this is a really long rant, I'll stop up at some point. But visualization is the big one for me. Like, someone will say something really simple, like, oh, I don't know, it will be really simple, and I will just be like, I don't understand. And then it will just be like, no, well, I don't get what you understand. I don't know how else to do it. But they don't understand. I'm taking everything they're saying literally. I'm not taking any nuance or meaning between any of it. So yeah, I don't know what I said really. I hope I said something that was useful, or maybe, I don't know. This has been really useful, so thank you.
Thank you, Becca. I relate to that. That was useful. Thanks. Lizzie, you wanted to?
Hi. Yeah. So, but basically what you're saying was about like the papers being wishy-washy, which is exactly like my same thing I was explaining earlier with the fact when you get a list of things you need to do, they just put so many nonsense words into these things to make them sound more English student-esque, to appeal to that sort of side of like a storytelling. But sometimes they don't need half the stuff they write in papers. Like, I hate it when I open up a paper and I see that it is more than 10 pages long. If anything can't be said in 2,000 words, for me, it's too long. And I will spend a whole day reading that one paper, because there's just so much nonsense in there of just language they put in for language's sake. You end up just going through the whole thing, trying to find the bits that actually matter. And probably they could have said that on one page, and having the freedom and the allowance to write as much as you want with no one actually checking you with a word count, I think is really mean to everyone who's struggling with language. I guess what I do like about the fact we do have a word count, we do have a limit, and practicing having that word limit is really good as a starting point for people who are going to go into academia, because it is good to be able to get across in a small amount of words exactly what you need to without talking too long on a certain topic. And I found actually a couple of papers recently have had video abstracts to their papers. And by God, these are like the best things ever. You're writing a paper out there at the moment, guys, put a video abstract in. There's a couple of them I found, and they're probably about 2 or 3 minutes long, and they explain the paper in a video format that has all the diagrams, all of the figures on there, with a nice little interaction, someone narrating. And watching that, I have understood a paper which I've spent 10 minutes reading, going, I don't understand anything in it. And suddenly I'm understanding everything because someone's visually and verbally explained it to me. And by God, they're like the best things ever. But like, I was going to go back to a point that was made earlier about the courses and having like people who are lecturers going to different courses for people who are neurotypical, like a dyslexia day or autism day, ADHD day. And I think these things, I've said for a while actually, this would be such a useful thing to have as a person, like as an undergrad with my friends around me. I've grown up for years. My brother's autistic, my whole family's autistic, so I've got a very good understanding of it. But a lot of people come from a neurotypical background. They've got no clue what to do with someone who's sat there not being able to sit in their seat because they're bouncing around off the walls. And having a day as a department, or like as a training sort of week maybe, or like having this option at least to go out to these courses to understand what it truly means to be dyslexic, how their brains think, and what are some simple things you can do as a lecturer to be like, right, this is what I can include in my things to help these people. And to do that, you can't do it with everyone. You can't do it with all of the different things under the sun, because sadly we are all unique and everyone is different. But if we can at least do it with the top 5 ones that we see within the department of coming through, I think that will be a massive help to everyone in understanding how all of these brains work and what we can do to actually help improve that as a cadet, of like bring someone in who's a specialist. Because I think everyone will thrive with that. Even you got colleagues who are dyslexic or sort of autistic, and it's just going, oh, that's how your brain works. Oh, I now understand you a lot better. And I've had a lot of friends who have done that too, and they've gone, your brain thinks in that way. That's so strange. Oh, that makes me understand you a bit better. And it's crazy. It's so helpful. Even for me as a neurodivergent, I've spoken to my neurotypical friends. Apparently, they can sit there and they can think of nothing in their brains. And that's something that flabbergasts me. How they do it? How do they do it? I want to know, because I would quite like to do that myself. But yeah, having those days would be such a great way as a department to grow and appreciate and get in these amazing people, because we are amazing. We've got great brains. We think in a very different way to everyone else. And that's why the Department of Archaeology is so great, because we vitalise that. And this is another way we can do that. I think it would be really helpful.
I'm going to say thank you, Lizzie. And before I ask Reba to come in, I'm going to take the opportunity to just say something, because when I organised the Teach Out recently, the same topic came up, and that is the opportunity to have days where you discuss matters. And in this case, it was the matter of things like diversification and the contentious issue of decolonizing for some, I think that this is something that students might be able to help us on, because they have a certain amount of ability to push back on the amount of time that we have to be able to do those kinds of things. Because to be able to have a whole day to dedicate to talking about neurodiversity and even to pedagogy, I mean, we do have so-called away days every other year, which are usually away afternoons where we talk about teaching, but usually that's geared again to some kind of audit. When we have REF, we have Athena Swan, which is good. Athena Swan pushes us to do things, but it's a big document. When we have these things, we just our time has seriously been eroded, and there's not a lot of scope for putting in days like that. But if the students push the university and say, you're not giving your staff time. I mean, this is what part of the strike is that I should be on today, I suppose, is about, carving out that time, we don't have the space to even think anymore, really, so that's one thing that I think is a practical step I would urge students to do, is kind of organize in a sense of like pushing toward the management side of things to try and find ways that the staff of departments need to be able to have more time to do this kind of training.
Yeah, I know even within the college, so I'm lucky enough to be part of CHADS, which we do like research forums, and I've managed to present some of my stuff, which has been great. And as part of that, we had someone talk about how they were studying dyslexia, and it explained it in small kids and does it limit them and all this stuff. They're dyslexic themselves, and that's why they've done this. And they were talking about the simplest of things, and I was like, I didn't know that was because of my dyslexia. Oh my God, someone else has that too. That's this. And I've been dyslexic for years. I've spoken about it. I've talked to people about it. But even just sitting in that sort of environment, I learned so much about myself. And I went, oh my God, that's other people have that too. And it's one of those things you kind of go, oh, it's like light bulb moment. And I think by having these sort of things as a department, even if it's just like a day, we can go through the top 5, an hour each, a specialist comes in, or even not even specialists, even you can just have someone studying it like we had within CHADS. You can have someone come in, talk about what it means to be like that, sort of things that they might experience and how we can help them. I think you'll find an immediate change within people's lecturing styles, how they treat people who are neurodiverse, the compensation you give them as an outcome, some for the support as well. And I think you'll find students are going to be a lot happier, and the lecturers are too, because they'll understand people more. I think it's something to be so important. So it's a simple, easy thing that can be put in if time and stuff allows it. I think it'd be great to do that.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Reba, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it's just basically to sort of go off the back of what Lizzie was just saying there, but also to add that I think we're also uniquely positioned as like, I don't want to say mentors exactly, but as people who are neurodiverse, I think we can do a lot to help other people too, because I've been part of the DCAD department for a year now, which is the foundation course, and some of essentially tutoring students who are hoping to go into the archaeology department or the arts and humanities. And I've had one student who is autistic, and just being able to think about what their brain is doing, even from like a remote, because my brain doesn't think that way, but I'm aware that their brain thinks in a different way. It's essentially what Lizzie's saying about just learning about how other people learn and being aware of it, and being able to put my own experiences also like to the fore as well, to say, well, hey, I know that I've struggled with this, so the fact that you're struggling with something else because of how your brain works, like we're on the level there, like we can have a conversation about it, we can find ways through it. And I think that because of that, it's been a really helpful relationship to have with the student, because they've been able to sort of really, like the progress they've made over the course of the year has been really incredible, and I'm really proud of them. But I think, you know, having people around them who understand that they can make progress and that there's nothing, you know, stopping them, and that you know, the fact that they don't think the same way as me, that's not a hindrance, that's just something that it's, you know, it's something different that we need to work with, could be really helpful going forward. So I fully support this, you know, having these training days and just learning a bit more, because you don't even need to learn that much. You just need to learn to accept that people think differently, and that might be thinking in these different kinds of ways and learning in these different kinds of ways. And if they're struggling with one way, to think, okay, well, you know, let's try something else. Let's just keep going until we can find the way that helps you best. So yeah, full support of that is all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I also think adding to that is asking people what helps them as well. It's very simple. You can literally, at the beginning, first lecture of the year, if you're told beforehand what everyone's got, these are people who've been diagnosed. I've only just been diagnosed with ADHD this year, so that's something that wouldn't have helped me then. But a simple list of things when you go into like a new lecture theatre, you can be like, right, what helps you? What's good with your learning? Is there anything you need that I can do as like give you the lectures in advance? give you a recording of the lectures, make sure everything's recorded here and there, or be more allowant if you can't make it to a lecture because you have that anxiety and sometimes you just can't get out of bed. And actually having that resource of the lecture, if it can be online at all times, that's going to be great for those people who then they don't feel like they are being defeated by something that they struggle with. And those simple things, having that spreadsheet, it literally can be a list of questions. What's going to help you in the year? What do you think will benefit you? And having that like every 6 weeks as a sort of like, is there anything that's changed, or is everything good? Would you like something else? Like, I know we have the feedback forms, but something like that of asking you as a neurodiverse person or as a class, is there anything I can do that will make your experience better and your learning better now from the start, from the get-go? Like, for example, only do 30 minutes rather than the 45 minutes. That's something I would put down. Like, have a 30 minutes and then 30 minutes and then have a break. Like, it doesn't even have to be 10 minutes. It can split it up into the 5 minutes. Like, that's enough for most people. Like, 5 minutes, quickly get up, wander around and come back and sit down in your chair. And if you do need to get up, you move around a lot, you put that in your thing saying, I need to just get up and move for a bit. And then when it happens, the lecturer then isn't surprised and there's no argument and things can move on a lot better. I think that would be very beneficial for lecturers and the students.
I fully agree with that. And I think that it's something really important to be said for having that at the beginning of the term, so that you don't go into it like halfway through the term where it can come across as an obstacle. Like, I think if you're saying, oh, we haven't talked about this at all, some issues have come up and now we need to, fix the issues. I think if you just go straight in, like beginning of term, hey, this is how we're going to do it. There's different ways of thinking, different ways of learning. We're going to try and sort of keep an eye on how you guys are doing. Email me anytime, fill in the little thing and let us know, so that it's seen as more of a process that goes throughout your learning experience, rather than you try and you struggle and you struggle and you struggle, and then you need sort of an intervention or some help, or we think, hey, well, maybe we need to rethink the way you learn. I really think there's a lot of value in starting the term, starting the year that way. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, I'm even thinking now, like because I've had to catch up on a couple of lectures and I've been watching them online, and I'm like, oh my God, I've stopped like half an hour in. And I'm like now thinking that I might actually have my own conversations with the lecturers and be like, if I put up my hand and be like, can we please take a break here at half an hour mark? And then rather than the 10 minutes and the 45-minute mark, I think that would be so much more helpful. So I'm even thinking I'm going to do that now, like when it gets back for the next bit of the next term, because I think that'd be like of such a help.
Can I just ask whether the flipped classroom method has been at all useful for, I don't know, Lizzie, whether you have any experience with that?
What do you mean by flipped? Is that like the online?
Yes, the pre-recorded lectures, so that they're sort of small size pre-recorded lectures, and then maybe finishing off the lecture in the classroom or something. So it's a bit.
So I haven't had that. I've only had like the lecture itself has been recorded, or it's all been online, or it's been like a hybrid of some people in the class, some people online. And I found that has really worked, except there was one occasion recently where for my anxiety, I was traveling home and I wanted it to join online so that I didn't have that added stress of like, oh my God, they've got to get trained and I've got to pack. And so, but then they forgot. So it was never put on as an online. I feel like it should be always automatic, even if you don't think anyone's going to join online, that you set up the Zoom link anyway, just in case people do end up joining online for last minute and they haven't had a chance to contact the lecturer. Because I then sat there going, I'm on the Zoom call on my own, no one's replying in the group chat, no one knows that I'm just sat here waiting for the Zoom call to join. So little things like that I think would be useful, but I haven't experienced like here's a 30-minute clip beforehand, which I do think could be quite helpful, but equally, will people watch it? It's another thing.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, I know that the hybrid classes sometimes can be quite difficult to set up depending on what room you're in when you have to get that Zoom link up and running and the OWL, and it's so that might be I guess off-putting to some lecturers in a lab or something, but it's useful to know that that's actually been quite a useful thing. Yeah, I was just wondering about the breaking up of the lectures. I have one final question, and we should sort of draw this to an end because we have run over a bit, and obviously people have other things that they need to get to. So before I profusely thank everybody, I wanted to broach the subject of ADHD meds and whether anybody's had experience with that, because people talk about neurodiverse people don't have these experiences. I mean, I don't think I know what that is to like to feel. I've read things about Adderall or whatever, but is that a tool that anybody has used and found that it has been helpful for them?
So I know I'm not on meds at the moment. I have to get the formal diagnosis to then be put on meds. But the way I've been told about it, it's kind of like it's a stimulant. So with the ADHD brain, stimulants don't work in the same way as they do for a neurotypical. So for example, when I have a coffee, I'm ready for my nap, whereas most people are then like awake and they're bouncy. So it's that sort of thing. And when I found other people, it's kind of like there's 10,000 voices going on at once, but that kind of like quiets them down a little bit so you can remember the actual thing that you need to do. So for an example, if I go out shopping and I've gone out shopping for some milk, I will come back with a TV and no milk. That's with no meds. But then when you go out shopping with meds, you remember the milk, but you still also buy the TV. And that's kind of the difference. Okay. It's not stopping the brain still going along, but it's actually at least keeping you on track and remembering what you were actually intending to do in the first place.
Becca's got something to contribute here.
Yeah, the system, I was diagnosed this year and put on meds within a week. Something that I definitely wanted to trial out to see for myself, because when I first started looking at this stuff, there was a lot of, sorry, some colleagues just returning from lunch, so I'll wrap this up quickly, but there was a lot of stigma around this medication because it's a stimulant, and you either see these kind of TED Talks of people being like, oh yeah, like it's like seeing with glasses for the first time. That's not everybody's experience. Sometimes medication really doesn't help. I was put on a medication called Alvance, which is the standard one that they put on because it's the one that's proven to be more effective for most people, so they start you off on that one. I wasn't allowed to be on Ritalin because I tried to use it as a study drug when I was in college, and it did not work effectively. So they were like, let's not try that one. But I had to really get the dosage right. So it was a good tool once I got the dosage right. They started me out on the lowest, which was 20, which basically limited effect, really nothing. Then I went on to the 40 and became a productive zombie. I wasn't leaving uni till 8 in the evening, not sleeping properly, but didn't know because I'm having stimulants every day, and not eating. And actually what I was experienced was hyperfocus at all times. So I'm used to hyperfocus, not when I choose it, just when it happens. But I was pretty much having hyperfocus. Even my colleagues in the office were like, it's really weird that you're literally saying nothing. Like talk a lot, even with the medication. But then I went down to 30, and it seems like such a small drop, but actually that had such I'm on 30 now every day. It's a nice kind of in-between point where I still have conversations, not so much a productive zombie. Also my colleagues do make me go out for lunch if I am looking like I'm being overproductive. But it just depends on the person. I am lucky that it had that effect on me. Not everybody does necessarily get that benefit or that use out of it.
Thank you so much, Becca. That was really a useful contribution, I think, to end up on. And as I said, and there's some more things coming in the chat, which I think, as I said, I will, I'll get the chat transcript and try and edit it so that it's tidied up and distribute it. If people would like me to anonymize it, I'm very happy to do that. And I think probably just say quickly in the chat right now if you'd like me to do that, or you are very Okay, so please anonymize chat. That's great. Okay, I will certainly do that. I will thank everyone so much for their contributions today. It's been enormously helpful for me personally, and I think probably for a lot of other people that have joined us. And I'd like to think that, as a number of people have said, that we will continue the conversation and add to the tea breaks and things that people have been organising through CIFA already, and hopefully we can join in and maybe create a more of a network about this and get our voices heard in places where they will make a difference to, at the very least, context sheets, and at the hopefully in so many other ways as well. So certainly pedagogically, what people have said today will stay with me for my practice. So thank you so much. Kristen, did you want to say anything? Kristen's got to go, so okay.
No, just to reiterate, like, thank you so much to everybody for sharing, especially for sharing your experiences, and it's been really great. And like I said, I hope this was the first of many conversations that we can have about this. It's really resonated with me, so thank you.
Thank you so much. And this session has been recorded and will be available. Unfortunately, the transcript from the actual discussion, which has terrible spelling mistakes anyway, because this will be recorded onto my computer, probably won't make it onto there, because it only captures it if it's recorded onto the cloud rather than my computer, and that option is not. I've already made that choice. But as I say, the anonymized chat will be distributed with all the useful tips and links and questions in there. And I hope to see you all again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.